Hey everybody, I'm Joe from Penn State USLI, and today I'm going to show you how to build your very own model rocket. I'm going to be building a custom one, but it'll be very similar to any Estes or Quest model like this one that you'll be able to buy at your local hobby store. To get started, first thing we want to do is get to know all of our materials, so we'll do that first. Alright, first let's get to know the parts of our rocket. When you open up your model, you're going to have a lot of parts, so first thing it's easiest to do is spread them out, make sure you have everything and know what it is. You're going to have a big tube, which is known as the body tube, and this is going to make up the outer body of your rocket. You should also have a smaller tube, it's known as a motor mount tube, and this supports the motor when it's inside the rocket. The motor would go inside. You're also going to have a couple of rings. You're going to have a small ring, this is known as an engine block. It gets installed into the top of the motor mount tube, and it blocks the motor from being able to come out of the motor mount tube. Your two larger rings are known as centering rings. They go around the outside of your motor mount tube, and they keep it centered inside the body tube, making sure that the motor is perfectly aligned and your rocket will fly straight. You'll of course also have fins. You may have 3 or 4 depending on your exact model. You also have a nose cone, which goes on the top of your body tube and makes your rocket aerodynamic. And you also have a shock cord of some sorts, which serves to attach the nose cone and a parachute or other recovery method like a streamer to the rest of your rocket. Alright, so we'll go ahead and start assembling our rocket here. The first part you want to start assembling is your motor assembly. So you want to start out with your motor mount tube. And the first thing you want to do is you're going to take your engine block and we're going to glue it into the top of our motor mount tube like so. Now for installing the motor mount tube and any internal parts of the rocket, it's easiest to just use some sort of super glue, which you can pick up anywhere. It dries fast, so it allows you to get your parts in place and not have to hold them there while they're drying. So you only need a little bit of super glue, it's pretty strong. You're just going to want to dab it on the inside of your motor mount tube like so. And then you can go ahead and place your engine block right into the tube. Now, to make sure you have it in the right spot, sometimes it's great to have an actual motor just to make sure that it fits in the tube. And after you install that, it should look somewhat like that, just glued into the end of the motor mount tube. Next thing you want to do is you want to take your engine retainer hook, and we're going to want to glue that with the super glue to the outside of our motor mount tube. You want to do this before you put on your centering rings, because once you have your centering rings on the tube, you won't be able to put on your engine retainer clip. So again, we'll take our super glue, we'll run a line down the outside of the motor mount tube. Don't need that much. And we'll just glue our retainer clip in place. Now you're going to want to make sure that's good and dry before you try to slide your centering rings onto the tube here, otherwise your clip might move on you. We gotta wait for this to get good and dry. So the next step, now that your motor retainer hook is all glued on and dry, we'll go ahead and install the centering rings onto the motor tube. I've done one here for you just to show as an example, but we'll go ahead and put the second one on as well. the way you're going to do this is you're going to slide the center ring over the motor tube, and it's easiest just to glue it after you have it in place. Because if you slide on with glue already on the tube, you're going to make a mess and you end up sticking the center ring where you don't want it to go. Another key point is you might want to sand the inner side of your centering ring, as it might be just a little bit too tight of a fit with your motor retainer hook on there. As this one's pretty tight, probably should have sanded it more. But I'm going to slide it down to about a quarter of the way from the top, and we'll go ahead and glue it next. Now the way we're going to glue it is we're going to put a bead of glue along both edges of the centering ring and give it some time to soak down into the gap. So we'll take our glue and apply a good amount along the top edge first. Once we have glue all the way around there, we'll switch to the bottom side. And now once we have it all glued, we're going to have to set it and let the glue just soak in for a minute and make sure it's all dry before we go ahead and install it into the body tube. Okay, now we have the motor tube assembly installed in the bottom of the motor tube, or the body tube here. Just to be safe, we're going to go ahead and add an extra squirt of glue along the aft centering ring, so we make sure it has a really good bond in there. Our next step is going to be to attach our fins to the outside of the body tube. Now to do that, you want to use epoxy. Epoxy usually comes in two parts. You can get it at your local hardware store. You have a resin and a hardener. Now to set it up, you want to find something that you can mix it in, and a mixer. Now I find it easiest just to use a plastic Dixie cup, and wooden popsicle stick works great. You want to start out by making sure you know the time that your epoxy sets in. This particular brand is 5 minutes, but you can also get 30-minute or an hour, etc. epoxies. I find it best to use the shorter drying times, because then you don't have to hold your fin in place as long until the epoxy sets. But if you do happen to have longer drying time epoxy around the house, you can always epoxy your fin and then somehow rig it up so your fin is held in place until it's dry. Now I already added a bit of resin to the bottom of our cup here, and we're going to go ahead and add some hardener. Now once you mix the two parts together, that starts the chemical reaction going and your epoxy will start to harden. This particular epoxy also is equal. You want to put equal parts of both the resin and the hardener. Again, different epoxies are different. You may need different quantities of each. I'm going to go ahead and add the hardener now. Once you have about equal parts of both in there, and go ahead and mix them up really well. Okay.